Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Got lots of animals around here, and I just thought I'd do a quick intro to talk about, what I want to do, what I want to share, and why you're even watching this video in the first place. I'm pretty much a one-man shop, and that's how this YouTube channel is going to be. Just one guy with a couple of cameras, hopefully some assistance every now and then. And why am I out here instead of in the actual studio? This is just a lot more entertaining, isn't it? There'll be plenty of studio stuff, don't worry. Plenty of things to go on in the studio. But for right now, when I'm not talking about technical things, I think it's a lot more entertaining to be out here, in spite of maybe some noisy parrots. Hi! So what's the point of this channel? What I really want to do is kind of open up my world and how I work and share it with you guys. Interactive music, and I think composing music in general is a bit like a magic trick. How do you do this? How do you do that? You must have a team of 10 people to be able to make scores for big games that involve lots and lots of hours of music. And the reality is, just like this channel, it's just me. So I'm going to show you how I do things and hopefully some tips and tricks that can help you accomplish the same kind of goals in the future, including how to make magical animals pop into frame. So what kind of stuff are we going to be covering here? Everything. From writing music, to scoring percussion, to orchestration, interactive music, producing things, recording them yourselves. There'll be, of course, animal cameos all over the place. And I'll also be doing a behind-the-scenes look at so many different games that I've worked on. Starting probably with Moss, because that's the most recent release, but don't worry, we'll also cover Dead Space and Tomb Raider. Writing for live ensembles, writing for MIDI, combining the two of them and how you make that work. I've got a laundry list of things that I want to go over with you guys, and that doesn't mean that you can't have requests in the comments, because I'm totally up for prioritizing things. Somebody laid an egg. By all means, make requests, and I promise I'm going to get to it at some point in time. It's just a matter of me cranking these things out. Okay, so maybe outdoors isn't the perfect audio place in terms of recording, especially for someone that's doing a music and audio channel, but what can I say? The name of the channel really reflects kind of the two things that I really love doing besides spending time with my family. And I want the animals to be just somehow involved with the channel. Not a featured thing, but just, entertaining kinds of thumbnails and pictures and maybe some facts here and there, probably some studio visitors. So my name's Jason, by the way, and I'm a composer. I'm also a drummer, and I love animals. So I've got 4.5 pages of things that I want to talk about. But I made a list, and I thought maybe I'd just run through a couple really quick. The main one that will probably be the beginning is the current setup that I have. So I'll talk about the equipment around me, the rooms that I'm in. I've got 4 rooms that are kind of split up between either tracking or machine room or instrument storage or the writing room like this. I'm going to go over all the speakers that I use and my screens and the setups, how I use my iPad. The software that I use, which is mostly Cubase, but I also use Ableton or Digital Performer, Pro Tools, Wise. Suggestions that I have if maybe I love something that's hardware, but there's a great software version. I'll talk about that. There's definitely going to be lots of super geeky info on Cubase. I discovered Cubase probably 3 years ago, 4 years ago maybe. It was right when I started Far Cry Primal, and it really did change the way I work. So I'm going to be showing you the main template that I start with on Cubase and how I have all my hardware, synthesizers, and external effects processors integrated into Cubase, how I do stems with Cubase, and how it really speeds up the workflow in general. It does some really neat things that maybe some other DAWs can do. Every DAW is different, and No one DAW is the perfect DAW, so it's not a Cubase fan sort of thing. It's just why I love it and how it works for me. What do I have listed here? Oh, going through the orchestra template, going through the slave setups that I have. I've got 4 computers in my machine room, how they're all tied together, how they work through Cubase, all about buses and audio flow, all my main track breakdowns, the VSTs that I have, the orchestra sounds that I use, how I have them bust, how I can process them independently or together, external effects setups, orchestral libraries, blending options, things like that. I'm going to do a really fun thing that I'm going to call Steal My Sound. It's going to have a lot to do with hardware versus software, why I use what I use, and kind of low price guides. Like some things, reverb, for example. I've got these amazing Bricasti reverbs that I first bought for Far Cry Primal. But before I got them, I was using Valhalla Vintage Verb, which is a $50 VST. It actually sounded really, really great. So examples like that are the kind of things that I love to talk about. Where yes, it's amazing to have lots of Bricasti reverbs, but they're expensive and they're outboard. So there's things that need to be considered. It's kind of like a give and a take. So a lot of it will be the synths and keyboards that I use, secrets like that to EQ and compression that I've discovered that I really enjoy, maybe a hardware compressor, but sometimes I'll use the software VST version of the same compressor instead of the hardware version, and I'll explain why. Reverb, delay, modulation, distortion, all my favorite plugins, VSTs, UAD, sound toys, all that kind of stuff. Also a detailed tour of the actual physical things around the space, my different rooms, how I mic up drums and percussion, how I use the synthesizers or the external guitar pedals, as well as any new gear or maybe new software that I really liked. The current favorites that I have, maybe something that's being used a lot on a particular project. And again, the hardware versus software thing I think is really important because a lot of people just don't have the means to make a fair comparison of a specific piece of hardware versus its software equivalent. And I don't have everything in hardware version, but I do have all my favorite stuff, and I can share some insights to the differences between them. I'm sure one thing that some of you are probably looking for when it comes to a channel like this are past projects I've worked on. So I'm going to do some pretty hardcore deconstruction of Dead Space, Tomb Raider, The Order, Moss, which is a new one that just came out, and then some fun ones that maybe people haven't heard of, like Farlands, which was shipped with the original Oculus a couple years ago, or Fat Chicken, which was a really, really fun, completely live, like country mashup score that I did. All kinds of cool things about anything from how I wrote the cue to how I came up with the ideas, how it was mixed, how it was mastered, all that sort of behind the scenes kind of things. And then I've just got general how-to guides. Breaking into the industry, general studio organization and time management, virtual orchestration, which will probably be more than one episode, mixing and balancing different virtual instruments with live instruments, reverb and effects, composing interactive music. I'll crack open a Wise session, go between that and Cubase, and talk about how I did what I did and how really these third-party kind of bridging implementation programs like Wise are really like composition tools. They're not just for implementation. I do probably half my composing in Wise when I'm doing implementation for a game. Programming realistic drum patterns or recording percussion. I'll talk about that as well. Layering live sounds with virtual sounds, mastering stems, final deliveries when you're doing it all yourself. The importance of gain staging and signal flow, and this doesn't matter if it's all virtual or if you're using some real recordings as well. Even with just VSTs in the box, gain staging is very, very important. And then talk a lot about analog versus digital as well. And then some general composing ideas. Music as an emotional language, which I'm a very, very strong proponent of. Pitching, when you're pitching for a game, how do you get a pitch? What do you do when you get the pitch? What's the best way to pitch? How do you begin writing a piece of music, whether it's something that a client's asking for or something that you just want to do yourself for inspiration? Budget considerations for anything, whether it's going to be all in the box or you want to have live performers. I've had instances where the clients wanted the live orchestra, but they've only had enough budget for maybe a third of the game, and then they want the rest to be VSTs. And I've actually talked them out of it and done it all in the box because I was going to record a lot of the percussion, and we ended up getting more interactive capabilities because we didn't blow so much money on a little tiny piece of the game being live and then having everything else be MIDI. Ideas like that. Live players in general, there's some amazing live players around the world now that record themselves. I'm going to talk a lot about that and also probably list some of my favorite players. And then just harmony in general and how I really compose from a harmonic standpoint first before I do any melodies. So we're going to get probably a little dorky and talk about different modes. And again, like I said at the very first part, music as an emotional language. This kind of goes back to harmony for me. And honestly, I have no idea the order these are going to be in. Probably it's going to be enough to keep things varied and keep me interested. But also it's going to be based on your recommendations. So if I haven't listed something that maybe you think sounds interesting, please let me know in the comments and I'll add it to the list for sure. Or if there's one particular thing where you go, oh yes, I want to know about that, let me know again, and I can prioritize things that way. It's really just going to be me. I've got one other camera right here and obviously screen capture stuff, so we're just going to be popping between things. Super casual. Hopefully, unlike this opening video, there's not going to be any editing involved. So it's literally just going to be me hitting record. We're going to be hanging out together talking about whatever, and then it'll be over. Speaking of being over, I'm really terrible at goodbyes. So at the end of every episode, instead of doing that whole like, subscribe thing, which I'm just not a big fan of hearing over and over and over again, we're just going to do this.